The manufacturing freeze. Among all the economic events that were released last week, the manufacturing data got lost in the shuffle. But what we're going to show you is that manufacturing is cooling, and this is not good. From the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, manufacturing activity in the region weakened overall. Specifically, new orders and shipments declined. We're going to talk about new orders. In particular, that's not good news. We also see declines in the employment segment. Here's the Philly Fed current general activity, 4.5. Last month was encouraging at a 15.5. We are hoping for a follow through. It did not take place. 4.5 is a very shallow number. Now, among the Philly Fed segments, we see current prices paid, 18.7. This looks good, but we actually don't want to see prices paid so strong, especially considering all the other segments are quite weak. Here's prices paid, 18.7, following last month's 23, a continuous slide to the downside, but remember, 18.7 is far stronger than all the other areas of the Philly Fed. Well, we see here the firms continue to report overall increases in prices. You see, prices paid represents what the manufacturers pay for their raw materials that they use to produce these products that we purchase. So when prices paid goes up, it means the cost to manufacturers goes up, which means ultimately the cost to us, the consumer, will also rise. Firms expect own price increases to match inflation. You see, the only real strong segment of manufacturing is a result of inflation, not growth. Why are prices paid rising? There's three general reasons why prices paid will rise. Input prices, that's raw materials. Supply chain issues, if there's a backlog, there isn't really. And labor costs, if the prices for labor does rise. And that also, by the way, is rising. But specifically, input price increases and labor costs are rising as a result of inflation. The only real strength, and it's not strength, but the only real increase in prices in manufacturing is a result of inflation. Now, remember, we also spoke about current new orders. That's negative 7.9. That's one of the weaker segments. It's very obvious current new orders, we'd like to see this number stronger, but it's not. Keep in mind, new orders are declining in the Philly Fed. Now we move to New York, Empire State Manufacturing. Now that number's negative, negative 15.6, one of the lowest lows we've seen in quite a while. But remember, new orders from Philly Fed were low. Well, Empire State Manufacturing, they also report new orders declined significantly. So we have the two most significant manufacturing reports, the Philly Fed and the Empire State, and they're both talking about new orders that are declining significantly. That's not good news. In red, Empire State Manufacturing. In blue, Philly Fed. This goes back to 2007 through 9. That's what we're looking at here, the beginning of the financial crisis. In particular, notice the Empire State Manufacturing went from a 25.9 to a negative 14.7 by early '08. The Philly Fed dropped from 7.8 to negative 20.2, again, by early '08. Where are we now? Well, in particular, Empire State, that's negative 15.6. Philly Fed, only at a positive 4.5. Now, there are other manufacturing numbers that were released last week. Industrial production measures the output of the industrial sector. That's manufacturing, mining, utilities. It shows us how much is the output of manufacturing. It's a direct indicator of demand for industrial products. It's not great. It's not awful. It's at 102.8. It matches last month's number as well. We'd like to see it higher. It has been trending slightly lower. That's probably the brightest part of manufacturing, by the way. It's industrial production. Capacity utilization, this is worse. It indicates a total manufacturing capacity that's being used. Basically, we picture a manufacturing plant. If it's running at 100% capacity, it's producing as much as it possibly can. The higher the utilization rate, the stronger the demand and economic growth. Where are we now in terms of capacity utilization? 78.4. We can see clearly in the chart. It's the lowest low we've seen in 3 months and one of the worst numbers we've seen in the past couple of years. The manufacturing plants and manufacturing industry overall is running at a very low capacity. Now, in red, we see the XLU. That's the utilities ETF that tracks very closely with the utility sector and manufacturing. This goes back to 2007 through 9. In blue, capacity utilization. At the beginning of the financial crisis, we saw numbers on capacity utilization 80, 79, 78, the high 70s. Well, where are we now? That's the right side of the chart. We're at 78.4. So essentially, where we are now in terms of capacity utilization, that's where we were in mid 2008. Why is this all important? Because last week we had a slew of economic data that showed us, in addition to weakening growth like we see today, but also red hot inflation. PPI and CPI were released. And the Fed is now facing a very, very difficult dilemma. Strong inflation, which is telling them not to cut rates, but weakening growth, which is encouraging them to cut rates. We dove into the data last week, and I think that you'll find what we discovered to be quite interesting.